In the Korean drama Squid Game 2, there is a brief introduction about the Marine Corps class. When a former Korean Marine identifies another man who is a more senior Marine by entry class, a hierarchical relationship is instantly established between two people who were previously strangers, and from this point on, a strong sense of solidarity is formed. In Korean society, it is said that there are 4 types of connections that strengthen the relationships between people. School ties that come from the same school, regional ties that come from the same hometown, and blood ties such as family or relatives. And to this, as explained earlier in the Marine Corps example of the Squid Game, military ties is added. This is called Kisu culture in Korean. Kisu means a class year or number used in the military, schools, and workplaces. Of course, it is natural that after completing intensive training and serving in the military in a harsh environment, a strong sense of solidarity develops among each other. However, in Korean society in particular, the Kisu culture and sense of solidarity that arise from such connections are so unique that they cannot be found in other countries. And they even act as an interest group and an ideological community. So what is the background of this unique Kisu culture in Korea? First, since we're talking about the Marine Corps, let's talk about it briefly. According to records, most countries around the world have Marine Corps, and it's rare to find a country like Germany that doesn't have one. The US Marine Corps is the most well-known Marine Corps in the world because it has been featured in many movies. The British Royal Marines, with its 350-year history, also boast a long history and tradition. The Russian Marine Corps is known for its outstanding operational capabilities in the Arctic region. Japan has an amphibious mobile unit that's similar to the other countries' Marine Corps. Also, the French TDM with 400 years of history, and the Italian San Marco Regiment. The Marines of these countries also will have a strong sense of solidarity and camaraderie during their military service. With the Marines as the background, many movies have expressed the reality of war, the courage and sacrifice of soldiers, and national pride from various perspectives. Representative films include Full Metal Jacket, which is set in Marine Corps boot camp and battlefield during the Vietnam War. The film Jarhead is set in the Gulf War, and is the story of a Marine who finished the hellish training camp life and is deployed as a sniper. The movie Victory in War is the story of a veteran US Marine Corps sergeant who trains a group of troubled recruits and turns them into brave fighters. The movie The Pacific is a miniseries about the Marines' battles against the Japanese in the Pacific Theater. In addition, numerous movies have been made with the Marines as their background. However, Korea movies and TV programs have different themes. There were movies in the 1960s that dealt with the Marine Corps' contribution, but since then, we can't find movies on this subject. Some movies are related to the Marine Corps, but this is different from the Marine Corps' camaraderie or activities, as the main characters or backgrounds of the movies are related to the Marine Corps. On TV, they connect celebrities who served for Marine Corps to mainly entertainment, such as featuring the situations where Marine Corps alumni set their seniority after confirming their Marine Corps class years. As I mentioned, the Marine Corps of other countries doesn't seem to have a culture related to the class year. Instead, just like in Korea, there are activities where discharged Marines participate in various organizations and maintain a sense of solidarity through friendship and charity work. In other words, the phenomenon of Kisu culture that exists throughout society, such as the example of the Korean Marine Corps, can be seen as a unique characteristic of Korean society. So, it seems interesting to examine this unique Kisu culture of Korean society. In Korea, when a freshman enters college, the senior-junior order is formed based on the year of admission. And this year of admission will serve as an important identity for me along with my age throughout my social life. Also, large Korean companies have a unique new employee recruitment system, where they hire new employees, train them at the same time, and assign them to their workplaces. In the case of one of the biggest group in Korea, this scale once reached up to 10,000 people a year. If you are hired through this open recruitment system, a Kisu culture naturally exists based on the class year you were hired for. In some societies of public officials selected through various examinations also form a Kisu culture based on the group they were hired in. Also, in the world of some celebrities and sports figures, a similar form of Kisu culture exists. Furthermore, along with this Kisu culture, there is a tendency in Korean society to confirm each other's age. This act, so-called ID checking, means revealing each other's age and refers to a culture that organizes the age hierarchy among each other to create a kind of order for avoiding awkward and uncomfortable situations. There is no answer to the question of when to do this ID checking. When both parties feel that it is time to check the other person's age, or when one of them feels the need to check the age. There is an implicit timing. Sometimes, ID checking is done on the first meeting, which can be a good sign that the two parties are close enough to do ID checking. Or it can be an uncomfortable situation that is caused by one person's unilateral request. Sometimes, this ID checking behavior by Koreans can be embarrassing for foreigners who meet Koreans. The deeply rooted Kisu culture or hierarchy culture that is spread throughout society like this affects our daily lives in various ways. Then, what is the background of Korea's unique Kisu culture and hierarchy culture, which is hard to find anywhere else in the world? It is difficult to answer this simply, but I think it is the result of various factors working together or gradually over a long period of time. First, the beginning of this Kisu culture can be explained as being influenced by the sense of community in the extended family from Korean agricultural culture. And the Confucian value of Jangyu, that is the idea that there is a social order between adults and children. The same group of people tend to form a community called we, just because they started at the same time and to help each other and benefit from each other. This may be related to the sense of community in the extended family that originated from traditional Korean farming culture. In addition, Korean society, due to the influence of Confucian traditions, places importance on the hierarchy based on age. Age is one of the important factors in determining an individual's social status and role. And language, behavior, and etiquette between people can differ depending on age. It is rude not to give up your seat to an elderly person on a bus. And when pouring a drink, you should place one hand on your chest or pour with both hands. And when toasting, you should not place your glass higher than that of the older person. Although it has been greatly diluted now, this culture of Jangyu still remains as a norm of behavior in many parts of society. Next, we can think that the influence of the military culture that has dominated Korean society for a long time is also very significant. Korea was under military rule for 30 years starting in 1963, and during this period, the military culture took root throughout this country. The hierarchical order and command obedience system within the military influenced the entire society. And this acted as a factor that restricted individual freedom and creativity. In addition, the military culture emphasized collectivism and unity for social control and maintenance of order. In schools and workplaces, there was a culture that emphasized corporal punishment and discipline. For example, in schools, there was an organization called the Guidance Group where upperclassmen wore yellow armbands and guided lowerclassmen. They controlled the lowerclassmen's hair and clothing, inspected their belongings, and sometimes even punished them. There were activities that would be considered human rights violations that are unimaginable today. Finally, there was the influence of men's military service experience. The mandatory military service period for Korean men has been gradually reduced from 36 months in the past to 18 months now. But young men are still required to spend a considerable amount of time in the military. It is said that this military service experience had some influence on the entire social life after discharge. In particular, in terms of the military's core values of absolute obedience and the culture of rank. Even after discharge, the individual continues to live with great and small influences within the organization, although there may be differences in degree. Then, what are the social pros and cons of this Kisu culture? For a member of society who is entering society for the first time, this Kisu culture can play a positive role in helping them until they become accustomed to social life through the social network formed by that person's class year. Also, due to the influence of the hierarchical order formed by the Kisu culture, it can be expected that the organization will maintain order and operate efficiently to some extent. But there will be many negative effects due to this culture. The authoritarian aspect of the Kisu culture can suppress criticism or opposition to the superiors, so this act may limit individual creativity and free expression of opinions. Also, it may create unnecessary barriers with people who are not included in the class or do not have a class. We are now living in an era where we feel the tremendous speed of change created by artificial intelligence across all industries and areas of life. In the past, when agricultural societies made a living through agriculture, or when the complexity of jobs was relatively simple compared to today, there was a certain degree of correlation between the length of service and the expertise in that field. So this Kisu culture and Jangyu Usio can be seen as rational. In other words, it is reasonable in some ways to acknowledge and respect their knowledge and wisdom. However, we now have a diversity and speed of change that is incomparable to the types and speed of change in jobs in the past. We are now living in an era that requires more creativity than skill. So I think that the place for these Korean cultures will gradually disappear. Korean society is also gradually facing this wind of change. The public recruitment system of large corporations, which was one axis of the Kisu culture, has gradually decreased in recent years. The public recruitment ratio, which used to be 40%, is gradually decreasing every year. In addition, as organizations become increasingly horizontal, accept diversity, and increase creativity, an environment is being created in which it is difficult to apply traditional Kisu culture. Above all, life values are now changing to prioritize individual life over the interests of the organization. So this Kisu culture will gradually be absorbed by new values.